Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Digging It, my peat cutters blog. This is our third day now out actually cutting the peats, and I've got a little bit of a different episode for you today, which is a review of some equipment. Now, in the previous episodes you would have seen that we were using cutting in pairs with a Tarashka, the traditional peat cutter's knife used in the Outer Hebrides almost exclusively. Peat cutting was a very communal activity here for many years, going back, you know, into the dark ages of history. But of course, over the years, the numbers of people out here cutting peat every year has dwindled to the extent now that it's maybe 2 or 3 families on this mooring back where I am. And I think that's a very sorry state of affairs in many ways. But I begin to wonder now, as the, you know, maybe 1 or 2 generations now have passed without peat cutting being a part of their lives, that one of the big issues for people is they simply can't work in pairs, or communities don't have the families who are here to enable them to work like that. And so I wanted to explore the options that in other places enable people to cut on their own and to cut in pairs when they can. And I'm very lucky to have a peat spade from Ireland, from Southern Ireland. It's this peat spade, which I think I showed you in the previous episode, said I was going to review. This is a peat spade broadly used in Southern Ireland, and this one is manufactured by Caldwells. It's a lightweight construction, very nice ash handle with a T handle, as you can see from that. The handle itself is at right angles to the blade, and the blade has a raised edge on it, which is a cutting edge. Now, this implement, it's amazing when you actually pick up a tool. Say if you pick up a Tarashka, you can tell that many years of design, many hands and minds have gone into making that work through a practical process, really. People worked out a long time ago how these tools should look, how they should work, and what produced the best results. And now with the Lewis Tarashka, whenever you pick up one of those, one of the old ones particularly, it just feels like it's there to do a job, and it's there to do the job properly. And when the first moment I picked this up, it's very lightweight, it's very easy to handle. The blade isn't too wide, so the peats it produces are not going to be extremely heavy. This just feels like a tool that has got years and years of thought and practice in its design behind it. It patently works, and it's a very comfortable tool to use. And I've been cutting some of my peat with it just to give it a road test. Now, you might have seen in previous episodes as well that the peats that the Tarashka produces are generally large squares or diamond shape, quite thick, often about that thick, 2 or 3 inches thick. This tool, this Irish spade, produces a very different shape of peat. And one of the reasons I like this is that this is the tool that you can use on your own. The handle, particularly the angle of the handle, makes it very manoeuvrable. It means that you can tip and throw with it as well. So one person can actually cut peat on their own quite easily with this, and use the space around them to put the peat onto dry ground once it's cut, all in one single movement really. It's a very easy tool to use. Now, anyone will tell you that cutting in pairs, particularly in the form of cutting with the Tarashka, which in Ireland would be called damming, which is going vertically down in slices in the face, rather than breasting, which is across horizontally. Damming with 2 people is by far the most efficient hand method of cutting peat, and I don't think anything can replace that. If you've got that option, then that's definitely an advantage. And you can even do that with this tool as well. This is a very good tool to cut with 2 people as well. But as an option for cutting on your own, I would very happily work all day with this. Now, the production level is going to be lower, but it is going to produce peat that will dry and that will burn, and you can actually get to work with this like straight away. It's a very handy tool. Now, I'll just show you the kind of peat that it produces. So that kind of section peat, it produces a peat about that length, which is a good length, and in that kind of section, it's a square section peat, and it's a very good peat for drying. It will dry quickly on the moor. Don't have any problems with that at all. It's liftable by one person. It's easy to handle. So I think it's a very good option, this Caldwells peat cutter's spade. I'd recommend it. It's a tool I've taken to straight away, and I find it really interesting to use, an actual delight to use, and it's a delight to own it as well. Before using it, took a grinder to the front edge there just to sharpen it, and I'd recommend that you do that. And also there are coatings on these tools sometimes that mean that the peat stick for a little while to them, and I would just ignore that, just cut through that, just carry on cutting, and eventually person and machine will come into perfect harmony. Now the other thing you need when you're out on the moor is a good spade. Now in some parts of Ireland particularly, and in England, you see adapted spades. Now this is Caldwells peat spade. This again is a very light, easy to use spade. It's got a long blade with a tread angle on the top. It cuts almost like a trench like shape. There's really no tradition in the Outer Hebrides of using essentially an adapted spade. Some people buy spades here, and if they've got a cut alone, they will add a right angle of steel here. I think you're far better off investing in something like that, which is a lightweight, it's a different profile steel, and which works very well with its right angled handle, with the T handle off at right angles. But you do need a good spade out here, and you need a spade that's good for peat, that's very durable in the seam here, because peat can be very heavy. It can also be very wearing on the joints and the construction of a spade. Peat is made up of many different layers, often within the same bank. You'll find layers that are soft, layers that are hard, in which there's a lot of grass, in which there can be remnants of moss. And towards the bottom of the bank as well, you'll find stone and hard matter, and they can be very wearing on a spade. You want a spade that can withstand a lot of pivot action. And these spades, this again is Caldwells, excellent construction. This is a quality steel. And that's quite hard to come by. Again, I sharpened the edge of that with a grinder, and that makes it very good to go through grass and on the kind of dry weather we've had, to cut through the hard surfaces on the top. You need to line peat sometimes, which is going in behind them, you know, to make clean cuts on the sides and so on. And I would recommend this spade particularly for that. Now, you might actually want to develop a technique of cutting peat with this. Whilst I've got the Tarashka and this other spade for cutting on my own, I won't be spending much time doing that. But you might prefer this, and it produces a flatter, more oblong type of peat, and maybe that's your style. I certainly think this, in terms of breasting, you're going horizontally into the surface, would be very good. It's lightweight, it's very easy to use, and both of these Caldwell tools, I must say that I can highly recommend both. This particular has been a revelation in terms of one person cutting. I do highly recommend these Caldwell tools. This is an excellent piece of machinery. I found it very easy to use, it's lightweight, it's durable, and I'd recommend that to anyone, as I would their spade. It's a great kind of companion set. Very happy out here on the moor on my own with these, and I'd recommend both to anyone who was thinking of taking up peat cutting particularly. I think we should seriously look at adopting other techniques, other tools, and the Irish peat spade from Caldwells is one that I would highly recommend.